Masters from LSU, so let's give it a nice warm welcome, and let's go to the answer session.
Thank you all for coming here. I guess I'm supposed to feel special because I'm the first presenter of this semester, but actually that's making me a little nervous. So before I begin, I'd like to thank all of those who helped me in this research. So Mr. Donahoe, Ms. Frank, Mr. Martins at the Main Center, and also our coach Jyoti Shaha, who accompanied me in the field. And also thanks to my thesis committee, my advisor Dr. Robinson, Dr. Sean Long from Washington University, Dr. Stoll, Dr. Cheman, and Dr. Tenero. And also thanks to my funding agencies. We don't have any NSF fund at present, so we work around with these sort of grants that we get from the department, from the Capstone International Center, from the Graduate Students Association at UA, and the graduate school. So let's get back to the title. This is quite a lengthy title, so I've asked you to focus on two phrases here: tectonic models and the Almora clippage. So we're basically trying to test the available tectonic models. And to do that, we went to the Almora clippage. Now, the tectonic models generated in the Himalayan crust belt is very important because not only these are used all around the world to interpret the geological evolution of similar orogenies, but it is also used to answer basic questions pertaining to the processes of tectonism. For example, climate orogeny interactions and crustal growth in the orogenic settings and so on. And that being said, these models have a very huge scientific impact. And keeping that in mind, we should try to refine these models as far as we can. And why we going to the Almora clippage to test this model, I'm going to explain this in a few minutes. So before I get there, let us get a handle of the geographical location I'm talking about. So that is the Himalayan mountain belt, and if I overlay the international boundaries, as you can see, it begins from eastern Pakistan, runs into northwest India, then here in Nepal, and then comes out to northeast India. And if I zoom into the Indian Himalayas, that is the state of Uttarakhand right here, and the town of Almora is over here right below this bubble. So wherever you actually see this bubble in my presentation from this point, that is the location of the Almora the Almora town in that diagram. So the Almora town actually sits right on the cliff. So let's see what happened during the India-Asia collision. So the Indian plate was going towards the Eurasian plate at a velocity of 15 centimeters per year. But right after the collision, the speed dropped down to 4 centimeters per year. So just by looking at the huge drop in the speed, you can imagine how high the impact was. Now that impact squished up all the sediment that we had in the Tethyan Ocean in between these two plates, and that formed this polar crust bed. Now, this is the geological map of the Himalayas. I'd like to draw your attention to these three rock groups here. So, TH are the Tethyan Himalayan sediments, then GH are the Greater Himalayan rocks, and then LH are the Lesser Himalayan rocks. TH rocks are separated from the GH rocks by the South Tibet detachment system, and GH rocks is separated from the LH rocks by the main central thrust. Now, if I go back to this map, this purple outcrop all along the mountain belt, that's the main outcrop of the Greater Himalayan rocks. However, there are some clippes outlining the main exposure on the Lesser Himalayan rocks. And this is the town of Almora again, this bubble, and this is the Almora clippe. And as you can see, this is the largest Greater Himalayan clippe that we find in the leading edge of the thrust belt. So this is the reason why we picked the Almora clippe, because this is the largest clippe in the leading edge. Then, if I zoom into that map, this is how the clippe looks. It's bound by a fault on all the sides. And so this is the Almora clippe, and the right side of the same clippe is called the Dadelhura clippe because that's in Nepal. So the India-Nepal border runs somewhere to right here. And although it's structurally a single clippe, just because it's separated by this boundary, the clippe in the Indian side is called the Almora clippe, and the clippe inside the Nepal side is called the Dadelhura clippe. So the fault north of the clippe here is called the Almora fault, and the same fault in Nepal is called the Dadelhura fault. So this model actually summarizes what happened during the plate collision. This is borrowed from Dee's paper. She did this back in 2006. So right at the beginning of the collision, the greater Himalayan rocks were getting metamorphosed, which is denoted by this gray coloration here. And then in early Miocene, the MCT became active, and the greater Himalayan rocks started getting emplaced over the lesser Himalayan rocks. And with time, the deformation proceeded, and this is what we have as the end product. So this is how it looks. So if we walk on the thrust belt, like across the thrust belt, this is what we're going to see. There will be a bunch of thrust faults which separate the tectonostratigraphic units. Now, just depending on how you connect all these thrust faults in space, you come up with different interpretations. So these are the four major models that we see in the Himalayan thrust belt. So just see one thing, all of these models, like all four of them, look pretty similar in the hinterland side, right? However, all of them are different in the foreland portion. And as I mentioned, this bubble is the town of Almora, like schematically. So Almora Clippe is set at a setting like this. So this is the second reason why we picked Almora Clippe, because if we want to test which one of these four models are true, we have to go to the leading edge of the thrust belt. So the first model says that the SCDS actually never came all the way to the leading edge of the thrust belt. So as a result, we would see only one shear zone north of the Clippe, and the Clippe rock will be made of greater Himalayan rocks. The second one said the STDS actually came all the way to the leading edge and merged with the MCT right north of the Clippe. So the majority of the Clippe would be made of Tethyan Himalayan rocks, and we would see margin shear zones over here. So possibly we'll find two shear zones very closely spaced and with confusing senses of shear just because of overlapping. And then the third model says that all the STDS came all the way to the leading edge. It never merged with the MCT. So we'll have two spaced out shear zones with two different senses of shear. And then the Clippe will have both Tethyan Himalayan rocks and greater Himalayan rocks. The fourth one is kind of similar to the third one if you come to the leading edge, only with the difference is that you have another additional shear zone over here. So he et al. Worked in the Dadelhura portion of the Clippe, and they published this paper in 2016. And as you can see, this is the Almora town right here, but here they have two faults on the north side of the Clippe. So they did a cross section right there, and this is how the cross section looked like. So they said this shear zone is actually the continuation of the SCDS because it had off to the north sense of shear. And then, of course, the Dadelhura fault is right here, which is the continuation of the MCT. So, citing their observations, they said that this is the right model because they said the two shear zones are marching right below the Clippe because they found two closely spaced shear zones. However, Shubho Mondal, who worked with Dee and graduated in 2014, worked in the Almora portion of the Clippe, and he did geochemical studies. So I don't really want to get into the details of how or what you interpret from these numbers, but what it basically does is that this is the detrital Zarkon age, and this is the epsilon neodymium value, and the tectonostratigraphic zones in the Himalaya can be identified just by using these numbers. So these numbers hold true across the mountain belt, and they pretty much match very well for the three major tectonostratigraphic zones that I'm talking about. So from Shubho's interpretation, the entire Clippe was made of greater Himalayan rocks, and it was sitting on top of lesser Himalayan rocks. So from that, we can actually rule out this model because this model says that the Clippe should be made mostly of Tethyan Himalayan rocks. So this is where the motivation for my study came in because of this dispute on the either side of the Clippe. So I decided to go to both the Dadelhura Clippe and the Almora Clippe and to see what kind of shear zones we find here. So before I get into that, let me just quickly give you some examples of the rocks that we see here. So for example, inside the Clippe, right here, we see the greater Himalayan rocks. They're essentially highly metamorphosed, like this rock has big content grains in it. Another example, this is a schist, which is metamorphosed as well. However, in contrast, the lesser Himalayan rocks, which sit outside the Clippe, like here, these are not metamorphosed, and some of them actually have preserved sedimentary structure in them, like this one, which has cross bearings. And here's another example. So this one is folded in a North Virgin fold. This is a brick red colored quartzite, which is also from the lesser Himalayan sequence. So just by looking at the metamorphic grade, the contrast in their metamorphism, it's very easy to spot like where the rock group is changing. And actually, right around the place where the rock group is changing, for example, right here, we find this kind of sheared rock. So this is a rock with these quartz porphyroblasts in it, and some of them actually have pretty big quartz plates like this. As you can see, it shows some kind of shearing in it, and that is what formed this tail of quartz, excuse me, behind this quartz plate. So we actually found there was only one shear zone that we could spot, and it was pretty conspicuous, and there were quite a few nice outcrops. So we did thorough kinematic analysis of the shear sense indicators on those outcrops. So for example, this one, if I zoom into here, so that's a sigma type shear sense indicator, and this is not, so it basically shows a top to the south sense of shear. These two are rotated clasts, and both of them show a top to the south sense of shear. This one is another quartz porphyroblasts with a tail on it. This one also shows top to the south sense of shear. However, just to be more sure, we collected oriented samples and prepared thin sections out of them, and we studied those rock samples in the lab for their microstructures. And these are the microstructures we found, and as you can see, all of them are showing top to the south senses of shear. And just to point out a few nice ones, so this is a very nicely developed delta type shear sense indicator. This is a sigma type shear sense indicator. So from up to this point, we can confidently say that there was only one shear zone which showed top to the south sense of shear. So we can rule out the rest of the models and say that, well, this model is the one which is going to hold true because we found only one shear zone with top to the south sense of shear, and then also Shubho's paper confirmed that there was GH rocks on the triplet. However, we still are trying to get some EBSD data. So what EBSD does, it gets the C-axis rotation of the quartz grains, and from that we'll be able to identify any kind of crystal scale shear if there were any. And we're doing that to make sure that, you know, like one of the shear senses wasn't overprinted by the other one because two of them merged somewhere north of the triplet. And also we'll try to get some auxiliary data for detritus arcanage from the locations where Shubho didn't have any data. This would give us a better spatial extent of these arcanages that we have from this region. Okay, that brings us to the end.
Questions for Guido? Any questions for him?
So if you have multiple or overprinting of shear, would you see the multiple different generations, or would you just see the end result? How would
No, so this is the thing. So you actually, like in practicality, you might find two shear senses in one specific outcrop, and it could be for two reasons. First of all, it might be due to pure shear, where you have like different, shear senses in say different components of the strain ellipse. And it could also be due to marching, but ideally it's not possible to preserve one sense of shear and then just rotate like a few specific porphyroclasts the other way. So that's probably is not possible.
I was just confused. The EBSD, I don't.
Yeah, let's see that from backscatter diffraction. Yeah, let's just forget about the name. It's basically what it does. It measures the quartz C-axis rotation. And from that, so there's a software which interprets the kind of shear it went through and also tells you whether it was pure shear or single shear.
Any other questions? Okay.